Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about basically how to make your contracts awesome. More to the point, how to streamline them to make your life easier. Contracts are not something most people find enjoyable or exciting, unless you're an attorney. Even then, it's something we have to do. I'm just kidding. I actually really enjoy doing a good contract. I know that sounds funny, but that's just who I am. So there we are. Just to give you a heads up, one of the things that you need to be aware of is that if it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist as far as the courts are concerned. So the reason why I bring that up, one of my law professors used to say, and I think it's worth mentioning, is if it goes without saying, it usually goes better with saying. So if you're new here, my name is Taylor Darcy from Think Legal, where I help you create the business of your dreams. So welcome. Happy to have you. We go live Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to answer questions you may have, to assist you in any way possible. Feel free to stop in live. We don't just answer the questions that we're talking about. That's just sort of the topic of the day. And then we answer questions that are posed to us. So we're here to help you no matter what. And let's get started. All right, so number one, you're going to want to start with the type of contract specific to either your customer, your vendor. They should be different depending on who you're contracting with. So, and this is very important that you start with something. I've had people that have come to me and they've had literally nothing. And the problem is that verbal contracts, although enforceable and valid and binding, is that it becomes a matter of he said, or she said, whatever, fill in the blank. So a verbal contract is more challenging. And I'm not suggesting that you can't enter in a verbal contract, but the reality is always get it in writing. It's the safer, better bet. And when I say this, because I see these all the time, you will thank me for getting it in writing. The more you get writing in something, the more clear it becomes, the easier it is. You will be grateful that you did it. So, number one, start with something. Start with the basics. You're going to want to start with who the parties are, what the service is that you're going to be delivering or that is going to be delivered to you. Now, a lot of times the vendors will have their own contracts that they want you to sign. And here's a little tip that a lot of people don't realize. Those are negotiable. That's right. Just because a vendor hands you something to sign does not mean you have to sign it the way that it is. You can review it, and if you feel necessary or if you feel that you don't want to sign a particular portion, you can negotiate that. Now, it's generally speaking better to have an attorney review it because sometimes the language can get a little technical and you might not see something that the attorney has seen before. And so it really makes a ton of sense to have someone else review it as opposed to yourself reviewing it, because you may not see something, because honestly, most of the people I know, their eyes glass over about paragraph 2. They just do. It's not a judgment on you. It's just that like my eyes are screened to see certain language and verbs and things that are important. And so we'll check out something that you might not, because typically where they're going to hide something or where they're going to put something in is at a certain point in the contract. And I'm not saying they really hide something. I just mean they bury it. And so you really want to have someone review it that is familiar with contracts, that looks at contracts, that isn't just, and skipping over it. Unfortunately, you sign it, you're bound by it. But again, you can negotiate what's on a contract. So don't feel like that just because that vendor hands it to you, you have to take it. And sometimes it makes sense to walk away. Now, we're not going to tell you to do that, but that'll be our recommendation that that's what you should do. Whether you choose to actually do it is a completely different story. So I don't want you to think that you have to do something just because we recommend it. I get clients that go against my legal counsel all the time, but that's up to them. They at least know what they're doing. So the next step is you're going to want to create templates with easily modifiable fields. So there's going to be your basics, right? Where it's just going to be the same language over and over. It's also known as boilerplate language, but you're going to want to tailor it as much as possible to each individual client or vendor if that's where you're at. So specific names, types of companies, addresses, who you're contracting with, the company, the person, these types of provisions where all you can set up data fields in most programs. Word is very common, where all you would have to do is change the name on it and it could be the same. The one area where I do not recommend doing this is that you have the set like duties to be performed. You want to modify that each time, and each customer or client is going to get a new contract with new information as far as what their duties are. And you want to be very, very, and I do mean very specific. Because, as I said earlier, if it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist. So if you are vague in your contract, that can be construed against you. I've had it happen, several clients, where they thought by being vague it wouldn't hurt them. The actuality was the opposite was true. So you really want to be careful about not just what you put in the contract, but how you word what's going in the contract. Because you don't want to be held liable for something that you shouldn't just because it's not on the contract, or vice versa. More specific, the better, because that shows intent of the parties to contract, right? And that gives you a whole lot more leeway with the courts. If they try to bring an action and you've explicitly said in a contract contrary to that, it's a lot easier to get that type of thing dismissed. So keep that in mind, that this isn't always about you want to keep a contract fairly simple, but not too simple that it avoids, that it's too vague or ambiguous, or it's unenforceable for lack of concreteness, like the details aren't there. So these are all factors that you want to consider in that. Now, the next thing, you're going to want to update the terms every time you have a new customer completed. The biggest mistake you can make is using the exact same template or the exact same contract from one client to the next without modifying anything. You want to be very specific on what you're putting in. And so you want to modify it every time so that it's very clear that it's specific to this person. Now, you can pre-populate this, especially, and I'm just going to use a wedding photographer as the best, for instance. If you only do so many things, then you can pre-populate those types of things and put that in there specifically for that potential client. Like, you based on your wedding packages or so on and so forth. Plumbing job, materials, blah, blah. So you can pre-populate that, but it needs to be specific to each particular client. You don't want to just use the same template over and over and over and over again without adjusting those terms, because that's just because of names and typos and stuff like that. Those are ways that get hurt. Those are ways that the opposing counsel or opposing party can exploit and cause you problems if you choose to do that. So that's number 3, sorry. Number 4, you're going to want to keep the edited drafts of each particular contract that you're changing for each person, so that you have a version of it, especially if you have repeat clients, because that you don't want to have to, one, redo everything. Number 2, if you change something, you want to have the original version of it completed so that the parties have each copy of it. If you have the accessibility, there are programs out there that will do what's called version control. And so that as you change your contract for each client or for, just in general, it'll update that accordingly so that you don't have to keep track of versions. It'll do it automatically for you. Now, those are highly technical, and if you're just starting out, you probably don't have those or don't want them or don't need them. So I'm not suggesting you have to use that, but that's an easier way to take care of it than it is to try to keep track of it yourself. You can also just put V1, V2, V5, whatever at the end of each file name and then know that it's going to be. Now, that's not quite as easy, especially once you start getting bigger and you have more people that are handling the matter. Then having that, the document management system is a better way of going than using a shared drive with file folder names or names of different files in it. So that's why I recommend that. And it's easier to start that way and keep it going than it is to once you have 5 employees to then implement it, just because of the training time that goes with it. Each person that comes on, they get trained on the document management system, and it just works better. And it works better for contracts overall. Just in general, like you will thank me for this advice if you do a DMS in the beginning, because you will be so much happier that you did, especially as you get bigger. Yeah, you will be happy. The next thing, and this is the last, but it's not necessarily, these are in order, but not necessarily in order of importance. You're going to want to somehow fully associate the fully executed contract with that particular client. And you're going to want to save it in that folder, or if you have a CRM, client relationship manager, you're going to want to save it there so that it's easily accessible. And you will thank me for that too, because when I see conflicts happen, it is so much easier to pull that contract out and say, see, you signed it, here's what it said, and then be done with it and never have to worry about it, than it is to sign it, maybe file it with something, you lose it, it's hard to find, you never find it again, a year goes by, 2 years go by, you don't need it, but then all of a sudden you do need it, and you don't have it because you filed it somewhere else, or you didn't file it at all, or you didn't scan it where it should have been if you used paper copy. Which, by the way, with the proliferation of DocuSign and HelloSign and all of these different Adobe signs, all these different programs, there's really no need to do a paper copy anymore. It's just not. You can. There's nothing says you can't. But you really want to avoid that. The electronic thing is so much faster, easier, and better. It's easier for people to do it. They can do it on their phones. They can do it on their laptops. They can do it on their iPads. And most people have that technology these days. I've got a client right now that they don't have any of that technology, and they're having to fax it to me from Kinko's. And so it's taking substantially longer for them to get to a Kinko's to do it than it is for them to have. We could have had it done already. That's just how it is. I can't say it any other way. So you want to make sure that you're keeping all of these things in check, and that, if you can avoid paper because it's easier to file the electronic file with them, do it. If you can't avoid paper, make sure you're keeping scanned copies of things and associating it with the file of that client or vendor or whatever, whoever it is, so that you can refer to it later. If you've gotten value out of this video, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. And remember, we go live every Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. and hit that bell icon to be notified when we do. Have a great day.